today the yearly European tournament, the Mitropa Cup, has started, which is quite a historic event, and it is taking place in Austria. And I decided, together with, in cooperation with the Austrian Federation, with the Austrian Chess Federation, to cover the event, since I will not be playing there. And I somehow wanted to contribute to the event in general, because I think it's a pretty cool idea. Overall, I will be recording daily tournament game recaps from that event starting today. Today was the first round of the event on 2nd of May. And what makes the event even more special than usual is that it's the 50-year anniversary. Some of you might be not familiar with the Mitropa Cup, especially if you're not from Central Europe. As you can maybe already guess from the name, it means that not all of the Middle European countries, but many Middle European countries, therefore also the name Mitropa Cup for Middle European countries, are meeting up on a yearly occasion. I guess there was only a break during COVID where I actually played, and it was they did it online with arbiter supervision. I was playing there as well. It's a cool event. I've played there many times. I stopped counting at some point. And the whole system is that every year, the countries are changing, the hosting countries are changing, and after many years, it goes back to the same country again. I did also play last year, when I think it was in Slovakia, where I played, I think, 4 games. And I always like playing, because it's always nice to be able to represent your country and have just the whole nice team spirit. So the round, I think, has just fully concluded, the first round. Some more information I'll put also in the video description down below if you want to check it out. The link to lichess, the link to the website of the Austrian Federation, where they are also writing, I'm not sure about daily reports, but definitely reports which are coming quite often, and also to chess results. The tournament is taking place in Carinthia, in St. Veit, where I have just been for the Austrian League. It has kind of become the whole the empire of chess organization. Many events are taking place there, and it's a pretty nice small city. I always like to go there, and the conditions are always pretty nice to play there. Now, at first, I would like to show you the results of the first round. It is a men's tournament and a women's tournament, so they are taking place at the same time. So we are starting right here, first of all, with the men's section, also that you can see which countries are participating. As you can see, always 4 players are playing against each other, and exactly like in the Olympiad and in the European Team Chess Championship, there is the opportunity to have 1 reserve player. Quite a few teams in the Mitropa Cup, they bring 1 reserve player who is kind of a playing captain. Usually he doesn't even play a game, but is just there just in case if someone gets ill. So that is more common in the Mitropa Cup tournament than in, for example, the Olympiad, where usually the players are always switching many times in between the rounds. So first pairing was between Italy and Switzerland. I know most of the players here played against some of them as well. That encounter ended 3-1 to Italy, who won. Slovakia played 2-2 against the Czech Republic. I think this is also one of the matches where we are going to have a look at one of the games there. Same like Croatia against Germany. Germany was able to win in the end, but there was a pretty nice endgame win by my Croatian clubmate Lovro Novosel, which game we're also going to have a look at afterwards. Then there was Slovenia against Hungary, which finished 2-2. And France, who I believe should be the overall tournament favorites, at least judging by the rating, won 3-1 against Austria, which of course is unfortunate, and I'm sad for the team, because it would be nice for them to start strong into the tournament. But of course they were playing against the strongest team, arguably the strongest team in the event, and it was difficult. But the nice thing was that Lukas Dotzer was able to resume his very good form and win against a very strong opponent with 25-46 rating. Unfortunately, the other games did not go so well for Austria in that matchup. So in the women's section, there was Italy against Switzerland. Switzerland usually the tournament favorites in the Mitropa Cup because they have a pretty strong team overall. Hence, they also won 3.5. Slovakia against Czech Republic 2-2. Croatia against Germany 1-3 for Germany, where we are actually having a game at this pairing. There was a nice bit of that game which I wanted to show you. And there was Slovenia, another big chess country in Europe when it comes to women's chess, against Ukraine, who is, I think, for the first time participating in the Mitropa Cup. At least in the women's section. In the men's section, they are not participating. And Ukraine won with a very experienced team, at least with Ina Gaponenko. I know that she has been playing on a very high level for many, many years. I think Rakhmangulova is a bit younger. Rest of the players, I don't know so well. And France also won against Austria, unfortunately, pretty high with 3.5 to 1/2. Yeah, some of the games did not go, did go a little bit unfortunate in that matchup. Again, I hope that Austria is going to be able to fight back in the resuming rounds. But of course, we also have to say that France is also, I believe, one of the tournament favorites in the women's section. All right, so what we are going to do next is we are going to check out some of the games which I thought were interesting of today. The first one, as you can see right here, was from the women's section between Croatia and Germany. And in this position, Black was able to find, from what I believe, a pretty nice plan. Of course, Black is better. Black is up a pawn, and the pawn on d7 is not really going anywhere. Also, the pawns are fixed on dark squares over there. But it might not be so easy to make progress. The computer was showing that Black could also go for the move h4 here and then just bishop c7 and try to pick up the pawn on f4. But I really liked the plan which Black chose in the game. You can try to stop the video and figure out one way to try and get rid of the bishop on e6. And Black chose a nice plan to do so, which is the move rook to h8. And the whole point is that she wanted to go rook h7 next and then rook e7. And after that, there's no way to hang on to the bishop on e6. And it worked quite nicely in the game. c5 was played, a pretty nice trick, because after bishop takes c5, bishop takes f5 would be possible. And after that, rook e8 is coming. But Black had bishop a5 check, and after king d1 now, her plan with rook h7 was made reality, and then rook e7 came, and Black won without too many problems, because after that the pawn on d7 is also going to be falling. Yeah, so the next one is the before mentioned game between Lovro Novosel and Grandmaster Mario Stoya, young German Grandmaster who have also played in the Austrian league and lost to against, I think it was last year. Pretty young, talented. I think he's around 18, 19, should be something like that. In general, that game was very well played. I think it started out with the Catalan, and both players were playing on a very high level for a long time. But around here, Black started to feel the pressure because White has the better pawn structure. Material is equal, but Black has the double pawns here. And the pawn on e5 is not so easy to defend. Black went for the move queen f6 here, aiming to go to this endgame, which is defendable, should be defendable, but it's not so easy for Black to hold. But it was a practical decision, also considering that Black was so low on time. The computer says that rook d5 is a way to make a draw here, but what I'm sure was the problem for Black here was this move here, rook a8. And I was trying to figure out how is Black now actually making a draw, because queen f8 check is going to be a pretty nasty idea. And queen e4 check doesn't do anything. White can just go king h2, and still queen f8 is a big threat. It turns out that in this position, Black can just play rook d2, and after queen f6 check, king g6. If rook a6 check, there's always f6, and it turns out that White actually doesn't have anything better than to repeat the moves here, because otherwise black is the one who is going to be checkmating. But with seconds on the clock, this is not such an easy thing to discover, because it's, I mean, for the moment it looks like black is getting mated, but as you can see, there is nothing. And if rook a6 check, again f6 is holding the balance. But in the game, Doya played the move queen f6, and now we reach this endgame with a pawn up for white. Now, usually, from what I've learned in those endgames, if one pair of rooks now is traded, then black should be able to make a fairly comfortable draw, at least if they're careful. It also happened in the game afterwards, and it was still not so easy for black to hold there, and white was able to win the game eventually. But with rooks on the boards, it's especially difficult to hold. Usually those endgames with an extra pawn, if you still have all of the rooks on the board, it is the best practical option to try to keep all of them on the board, because then there are going to be some checkmate ideas, some ideas to double on the 7th rank, and black is striving to exchange one pair of rooks. Now in the game, black actually did achieve that, because white allowed it somewhere here with rook f6. Again, I think you should try not to allow it. It's another debatable question how you can actually make progress, but it would probably be a better idea just to maybe try to get e4, f3, g4 with the king on g3, and try to play around with all of the rooks on the board first, and then maybe at the right opportunity to try and trade the rooks. But of course, this is easier said than done. And in the game, this endgame was reached. Now, after g4, I think already won. After g4, he went for the move rook d2, e4, and here it started to become critical, because he did not go for the move f6. He went rook b2, and here already white could have used the chance to play the move e5, and this is what black should not allow in this endgame, with the pawn on e5, and then trying to get the king to f5, or actually the pawn to f5, similar to what we're going to see in the game in a bit. And then it starts to become, at the very least, very dangerous for black, sometimes even lost. So what would have been probably the best for black is just to try to put the rook on the 5th rank. This is one idea, which has the idea to play h5 next, and otherwise just to stay with the rook here. And once e4 comes, then black should go for this move, f6, and then just try to stay with the king on g6. It's still not like a 100% draw, but not allowing the pawn to e5 is really important. And like this, black should be able to make a draw. Now, also, I think it could be actually quite difficult for white to avoid black from getting in h5 on the next move, after which it's going to be even more easy for black to hold on after they can exchange the h-pawn. Yeah, but in the game, white eventually was able to get this setup, and now it was already losing for black. So black still did have some chances to try and achieve that. For example, here he could have gone for f6, still trying to get that setup, after which it would be not so easy for black for white to make any more progress. Of course, they can still try to exchange this pawn against this one, and it's always unpleasant for black to defend. But this is a very important move, and as we can see, even for strong grandmasters, okay, after a very long game and a long suffering as well, it's even more difficult. But we can always learn more and more, and this is one nice bit from what we can take away from this game, I believe. Because in the game, let me just show you how it went. White eventually was able to play f5, and after that, the e-pawn is going to be always very strong, and at some point e6 could come. Also, the king is in a bit of trouble, so what actually happened in the game is that there are often threats with e6 as well. So king g8 was played, and there was a nice finish in the end, which I want to show you, f6. You have to be careful here, by the way. If this pawn were on h5, not on g4, then there are some stalemate ideas. It's another famous endgame. Then black can try to play for this. Do you call it a crazy rook? I think you do. Because white, whenever white takes, then it's going to be stalemate. But since the pawn is not on h5, but on g4, there is no stalemate, and now the pawn on f7 is a huge weakness, and also white is often threatening to break through with e6. So what happened in the game was this, king f5, and now this was the final nice finish with rook takes f7 and e6, and here black resigned actually, because if the rook moves, then e7 is just winning. Black can give a few checks, but not for long, and now queen is coming next. So very instructive endgame, and I think a nice technique. And, unless I missed something in the very end, I think it was an overall very well played game from the white side, and of course, unfortunate for Mario Stoya that he was not able to hold it. Anyway, let's go to the next endgame, which I've seen here between the matchup of Slovakia against the Czech Republic. Jure Družka, who I've recently played in the Czech League, against Jakub Kusa. And here white is winning, but again, you can try to use this as an exercise, because I think the win is not easy at all to see, especially if you're on move 45, have played a long and tiring game down to 7 minutes. So you can try to figure out if you can actually find the win. Grandmaster Družka was not able to do so. He still played a good move, which is the move king g5. But after rook g3 check, he made the wrong decision, but a very logical decision. He went for the move king h6. After that, it's probably already drawn, because king f6, and now the king can never escape the h file anymore. And the rook can also not leave, because then it's going to be checkmate. So how the game then finished is with this king h5, rook b3, and yeah, here apparently they made a draw. So this was wrong. Here, still, what would have been winning is the move king h5 and trying to transpose to the line we've seen before, because if king f6 is now played, then still king h4 you can go back. But this is already kind of strange. What I thought was the critical moment, like we've seen in the beginning here, it turns out that b6 is completely winning here. So if a takes b6, then it makes sense that rook a2 is winning, because a7, a8 is coming, and black cannot do anything against it. But what happens after rook takes b6? It turns out that now king g5 is winning, because now there's no rook g3 check, and white is going to win the f-pawn. a6 cannot be captured because of this move, and the f-pawn is going to decide the game. Also, what stands out, that king f7 is not possible, because then I have a check here, and then I can take on a7. Also, there is the opportunity maybe to play rook h6 there as well, which could also be winning. King f7, rook h6. What I'm also wondering now is if king d5, then I guess I could take on f5, but then rook a6. This is also not this is also not obvious when I look at it. Maybe there's rook h6 also in this position. I didn't analyze that before, but it might be still good enough, because here there's king e4, king g5, and black is in zugzwang. Okay, I'm gonna need to check this afterwards, but I guess rook h6 is also an important move in this position, so that's very tricky to find. And as I said, king f7, either rook h7, rook a7, or maybe also rook h6 here. What I was focusing on in my analysis before is just this endgame, king g5, and now, for example, if the rook goes back to b1, I quickly had a look at this, check king f7, and now again, you could maybe even take the pawn on a7, but also this should be completely winning, because the a7 pawn is going to remain a weakness, probably even falling by force at some point, and this endgame is winning. Also, not like, I wouldn't be 100% certain probably when entering this endgame that it is going to be a win, and I would also be looking for cleaner solutions at this point. But this was really a pity, because Družka played a really nice game until then, and just at the very end, when he was coming very close, he needed to find this winning idea with b6, which I thought was nice, and therefore wanted to share it. So that was it for today's recap. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know if you have any suggestions on what else you would like to see in the next few days. It's going to be a 9-round event, so finally we're going to see some daily uploads once again on my channel. But if the feedback is alright, then usually I would probably stick to just going through the results and picking 1 or 2 or 3 games to go through with them and share some nice moments with you. Big shout out to the organizers. Again, I'm a big fan of the event, and I'm sure they're going to do a nice job with the organization, and that the players are going to be happy in Austria, at least. I hope so. Anyway, that was it for today, guys, and I'll see you tomorrow.